Are you a music fan? In the last couple of years, we have seen several biopics on artists and bands, and now Netflix brings a brand new show to its platform with Selena, the series. Is this production bingeable? This first part of the limited series follows the rise to stardom of Tejano artist Selena. First off, I loved the music and the soundtrack in this show. There are so many different genres and artists represented in just all of the music that plays in the background and transition shots and just throughout the entire show. I mean, yes, we have Tejano songs, but then we also have rock, pop, hip hop. We even get parts of Selena's songs too. And honestly, I could have used more of those. We get clips of them, and some songs we hear multiple times, and so it's great to hear those, but I would really like to hear some of her songs in completion. The story about Selena's life is interesting, and her sister, Suzette, is an executive producer of the series, so you gotta think that a lot of what we're seeing is pretty accurate. This gives us really good insight into her upbringing as well as her family. Now, while Selena is the name that we all know, and she is the lead singer, her sister is the drummer, her brother's the bassist. Her dad is also their manager, and her mom is there for that moral support and really just to support the entire family and to provide the much needed encouragement that they could all use from time to time. Christian Serrato stars as Selena, and I know most people are going to recognize her from The Walking Dead, but really when I see her, all I see is Susie from Ned's Declassified. In this, her Texas accent isn't overly consistent, but it's also not terribly noticeable. She's fun to watch, and she captures a young adult trying to balance fame and family and success and also just trying to have a life outside of music all at once. And it's fun to see how she progresses up the ladder of success and all of the steps that it takes for her to go through. And she is part of a very hardworking family and band. We watch them go from young performers playing backyard weddings to signed artists, making albums and touring the country. Anybody that comes from a family is going to watch this and feel that some of the dynamics that they see really ring true. I mean, yes, there is bickering, but there's also laughs and hugs. Now, I know that the dad in this has a good heart and he really wants what's best for his family. But golly, sometimes he's not painted in the best light. He's way more manager than father, and maybe that's totally accurate. It certainly adds a lot of tension to the story. But there are other times where the dad absolutely shines as a great guy. He is honorable, but he's old school. I mean, he comes across very gruff. He is very protective, but he's also got that soft spot for his family. The band dynamics are fun too, but for as much time as we spend with them, we don't really know much about them. And I'm talking about the ones that aren't the brother and the sister. They're still good on screen. They still work really well together. I mean, they're good-natured and they do provide some laughs and some chuckles sometimes. There's also some romance in this that works. I mean, it's frustrating and even a bit excruciating at times to watch, but I was hooked. I mean, I'm a sucker for romance, even if it's a cheesy romance. These first 9 episodes are only part 1 of the series, and it really felt like a long movie. The issue I have, though, is had they made it a movie, it would have been more impactful and meaningful. The episodes feel really drawn out, and there are parts to, I think, just about every episode that could be trimmed. That's going to make the episodes tighter, more efficient. I mean, in the middle episodes, or at least starting in the middle of the season or this first part, there's a lot of traveling that the band does. And so we see a lot of establishing shots of this bus or a van at different times driving down just through landscapes. And okay, I get it. They're moving, they're traveling from city to city, but it becomes very repetitive. We see it over and over and over again, and it just adds unnecessary time that is wasted and boring because there's no dialogue going on when most of these are happening. You're just having some music. And like I said, I like the music. It's just that this time is wasted time. Let's get back to the storytelling itself and move me along in an emotional way. Now, I know this is called Selena the Series, and so it is a TV show, and it really does, a lot of the time, feel like a multi-camera TV show. And that can be good and bad. I mean, it's almost a little bit like a sitcom. Each episode has a lesson where someone learns an important lesson, or wisdom is imparted before the show ends. I mean, it's not to the degree of, well, what have we learned today, like you would find on a Full House type of show, but it's still there. At times, some of the sequences, some of the interactions are very cheesy, and they feel so much more like an amateur production than a major big budget thing. But it doesn't always feel that way, and so that inconsistency really begins to stand out. As the series progresses, we get more in-car and driving sequences, and the use of the green screen is absolutely horrendous. It is so fake looking that it's distracting. One thing that I also found really odd is that there is this insertion of home video-esque type of shots, especially when concerts are going on, that I guess they're trying to feel like, hey, we're taking real life footage and putting it into the show, but it doesn't really make any sense. There's no context for most of it. I mean, at some points, especially in the last couple of episodes, we see a character using a camcorder. Okay, so that kind of makes sense now that we see, we're seeing some playback. But while this performance is going on, these insertions and interspersed like home video type, the perspective changes, the aspect ratio, all of that, it becomes very weird and doesn't fit. And so what it ends up doing is breaking me out of the narrative because I'm becoming invested in what's going on. I'm loving the drama. I'm loving the performance, the musical performance that I'm seeing on the stage, and then to have it all of a sudden shift to something that is just out of left field, and then go back, and then have it go back and forth throughout, several times in one episode. You're just going, what are you doing? Who got a hold of the editing bay, and why did you continue to let them do this? I said sometimes the interactions between the characters is cheesy. Well, it also can be overly dramatic or even melodramatic. And sometimes that can be worked for comedy. And sometimes that has a good effect because it fits within the scene. But most of the time when this was going on, it didn't feel natural. And what it did is end up breaking me again out of the narrative. I became more distracted by what the character was doing or how they were saying it versus the emotion that was trying to be conveyed. I think parts of this show are sponsored by Target. Seriously. There is TV commercials, there is print ads, there are Audible discussions about making a Target run, and then at even one point, Selena and her sister go inside Target to inquire about CDs. It was just kind of weird. Once, that's fine, but several times, and then it just became blatant, and it was just kind of a weird and odd type of product placement. And I love Target. Now, the pacing of this show is inconsistent, and that also comes into play a lot of the time with time itself. Just about every episode begins with a title screen that shows the year. So we're kind of grounded at where in the time-space continuum we are. But what will happen is you will have a character do something, and then the very next scene seems like the next day, but it's not. Large chunks of time have passed, and the only really way that I even had a clue is that time had passed was the hairstyles, judging by the length of hair. But even at that point, because it went from somebody cutting their hair to a photo shoot, I'm like, well, are they just wearing extensions? What's going on? I don't totally understand. And so those time jumps, they really need to establish those better so that I know better as a watcher where we are in this time. And it's okay if you jump over months and months. I don't mind that. Just give me a better clue that we have jumped over months. That way the whole show, that episode, doesn't feel choppy and all over the place. As I kind of expected, part 1 ends in the middle of the journey. We have the first 9 episodes, and when that 9th episode ends, we're in the middle of the story. Okay, that's fine. But it's not at a cliffhanger. It's not really at anything that is like, oh, gasp, I can't wait to see what happens. It just kind of done like we would go on to the next episode, except there's not another episode. Now, there isn't an urgency to this story. There is tension, and I really like the tension between Selena and her family and the band and just everything that's going on. But we also see some of the conflict that's brewing, that could be coming for multiple episodes. So it's not shocking, it's not surprising. So I find myself really torn on this series because I like the actors, I like what they were doing. I'm not thrilled with all of the performances in every single episode. I think that comes down to the direction sometimes, but I was drawn into the story. The information, just the world building, especially somebody who is not totally familiar with Selena. Especially her younger life and just how she grew up and how she became the superstar that she was. So that's awesome to watch. but it also has those negatives that I listed. And so I'm just kind of like, where do I sit with this? And I think because the storytelling is inconsistent, because it's a little bit overdramatic or melodramatic, it counteracts some of the good drama that is built with the family and some of the good storytelling that they employ. Overall, this isn't a bad show. I'm just not sure it's a I need to rush right out and binge this entire thing type of show. There's no sex, nudity, or violence, a little bit of profanity. I give Selena the series part 1 3 out of 5 couches. Were you or are you a fan of Selena? Do you have a favorite song? Let me know what that is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.